Hello, dear friends. Before I move on to my story, I have a small request from you. Never forget that we need the support of you, my dear friends, in order to grow and become a big family. For this reason, we would be very happy if you subscribe to our channel and like our videos. Many thanks in advance to our friends who support me and walk this path with us. You are very valuable. If you'd like, let's move on to the story without keeping you waiting any longer. Hello, my name is Samuel. I am 35 years old. I work as a senior financial auditor at a private auditing firm. No period of my life has ever been calm or peaceful. Due to my job, I constantly have to rush from one place to another, get lost among numbers, try to find people's flaws, and live in a constant cycle of stress. The only things this pace has brought me are some money accumulating in my bank account and my hair starting to fall out early. About 6 months ago, I parted ways with my fiancée of 4 years, Alice. The reason for our breakup was not cheating. She was simply tired of me being constantly exhausted, intolerant, and unhappy. She was right, of course. After Alice left, I started living alone in this old but spacious family apartment in Brooklyn Heights, Brooklyn, New York. The house had passed from my deceased grandfather to my mother. My mother had it completely renovated and gave it to me so I could live comfortably when I got married. In fact, this situation had always caused a silent tension within the family. My Aunt Sarah had never accepted that my grandfather left this house to my mother. Her son, my cousin Tyler, was someone who had never been able to hold onto a job for years, constantly changing jobs and drowning in debt. My Aunt Sarah would always find a way to slip in the remark that while Tyler was struggling with rent, Samuel was enjoying himself alone in a big house. But that's not our topic. Our topic is how my life turned into hell after I started living alone in that house. Everything started with my sleep pattern being disrupted. At first, I attributed this entirely to my breakup with Alice and the intense audits at work. When I lay down in bed, my mind wouldn't go quiet, constantly thinking about the past or the meetings I had the next day. It would take me hours to fall asleep at night. But the real problem started after I fell asleep. At first, I would wake up feeling only a heavy fatigue, as if instead of sleeping all night, I had been carrying stones. All my muscles ached. Then this situation turned into feelings of suffocation. In the middle of the night, I began waking up gasping for air as if all the air in my lungs had been vacuumed out. When I opened my eyes to the darkness, my throat would be dry, and I would feel as if tons of weight were pressing down on my chest. I would get up, drink a glass of water, and try to calm myself by taking deep breaths. Stress, I would say to myself. All of this is because of stress. The situation got worse day by day. Now I wasn't just running out of breath. I could feel my throat being squeezed in my sleep. In those suffocating moments, right before waking up, the same blurry image would always appear in my mind. I felt sharp things stabbing my eyes, harsh, needle-like textures scratching my face. I struggled to wake up but couldn't move my muscles. Lying in bed like I was paralyzed, I waited for that invisible and heavy pressure on my chest to pass. When the pressure slowly lifted, I would sit up in bed, drenched in sweat, coughing. This insomnia and night terrors began to directly affect my work life. I couldn't focus in meetings, misread numbers, and yelled at my coworkers for no reason. When I looked in the mirror, I could see the dark circles under my eyes. My face had sunk, and my skin had turned ashen. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and went to a sleep disorders clinic at a private hospital in Manhattan. The doctor listened to me and took notes of my complaints. He said it might be sleep apnea and put me through a sleep test in the hospital for one night. They attached wires to my head, chest, and fingers and asked me to sleep. That night in the hospital room, for the first time in months, I had an uninterrupted sleep without experiencing that suffocating feeling. The next morning, when the doctor examined the results, he said I had no physical problems. Your oxygen levels are fine, your airways are clear. What you're experiencing is most likely sleep paralysis episodes caused by intense stress, he said. He prescribed me a strong antidepressant and a sleeping pill and sent me home. In the first week I started taking the medication, things got even worse. The sleeping pill locked me into the bed. When that suffocating feeling came at night, when that weight settled on my chest, I couldn't wake up. Under the influence of the drug, my consciousness would become half awake, but my body resisted waking up. I began to experience that suffocation torture not for seconds, but for minutes. I felt the pain of those sharp things stabbing my eyes in every cell of my body. I wanted to scream, but couldn't open my mouth. I threw the pills in the trash. One Saturday, my mother came to visit me. My Aunt Sarah was with her. When my mother saw my condition, she could barely hold back her tears. "My son, what happened to you? You've withered away," she said as she hugged me. My aunt, on the other hand, was standing in the middle of the living room, her eyes wandering around the house. She had that usual fake, artificial smile on her face. "Of course, this big house became too much for you after Alice left. You can't manage all this by yourself as a man," she said. While my mother went into the kitchen to prepare food for me, my aunt headed toward my bedroom. "Let me change these bed sheets and air the room. It must smell terrible in here," I heard her say. In my exhaustion at that moment, I couldn't get up to stop her. I just sat there on the couch, watching my mother bustle around in the kitchen. My aunt stayed in the bedroom for quite a while. It took longer than necessary for her to change the sheets and open and close the window, but I wasn't in a state to dwell on it. My mind was constantly swinging between falling asleep and the fear of waking up suffocating. Toward the evening, my mother and aunt put the food in the fridge and left. The few weeks after that visit from my aunt were the darkest period of my life. I became so afraid of falling asleep that I left the living room lights on all night, sitting in front of the television. Only when I was physically exhausted would I doze off where I sat. But whenever I went to the bedroom and lay down in my own bed, that horror would start again at full force. Now it wasn't just a weight on my chest. The moment I laid my head on the pillow, I would feel a warmth spreading from the back of my neck to my face. A sickly, feverish warmth. In the first moments of falling asleep, I would feel a shadow right above my face, very close to my eyes. Then those sharp, hard things would start scratching my eyelids. I felt a pain as if my eyes were about to be ripped out of their sockets. It was a Thursday night. I had made a big mistake at work during the day and had been severely scolded by my superiors. When I got home, my head was pounding. Taking the risk of everything, I went into the bedroom. I lay down on the bed without even changing my clothes. The moment I put my head on the pillow, I found myself in a deep darkness. In my dream, I was in my bed, but I couldn't move. I was frozen. The door of the room slowly opened. I couldn't see who or what entered, but I could feel that it was standing at the foot of the bed. Then that weight slowly crawled over me. It sat on my chest. My breath suddenly stopped. I opened my mouth to try to breathe, but my throat felt knotted. At that moment, something hard, like thorns, began to move across my face, right over my eyes. It was a pain that pierced into my eyelids, burning my flesh. Digging my nails into my palms, I forced myself to wake up with all my strength. With a violent jolt and a rasping breath, I opened my eyes. I was in the pitch darkness of my room. My heart was pounding as if it would burst out. I was drenched all over. My eyes were burning. I held my face with both hands. I rubbed my eyes. It hurt as if dust or shards of glass had gotten into them. I sat up and turned on the lamp on the nightstand. As I tried to steady my breathing, my hand involuntarily went to my pillow. When I grabbed the pillowcase to straighten it and to disperse that hot and suffocating air, my fingertips caught on a strange hardness. For a moment, I hesitated. I checked that part of the pillow with my hand. Under the cover, right in the middle of the pillow, exactly where I rested my head, there was an abnormal hardness. A small, flat, and hard object hidden inside the soft fiber. An indescribable chill spread through me. I took the pillow onto my lap. I quickly removed the case and threw it on the floor. Nothing was visible on the surface of the white pillow. But when I found that hard spot again with my hand, I realized that the object had not been placed from the outside, but had been inserted directly between the seams of the pillow, right into the core of the fiber. I don't remember how I jumped out of the bed or how I ran to the kitchen. I grabbed a large fruit knife from the kitchen drawer. My hands were shaking. When I returned to the bedroom, the pillow was lying in the middle of the bed. I sat next to it. I pushed the tip of the knife into the white fabric of the pillow and with a single motion cut it open from end to end. The fibers inside spilled out. I plunged my fingers into that white, soft stuffing. I pushed the fibers aside until I found that hardness. Finally, my fingers touched it. When I pulled it out and looked at what was in my palm, I felt the air in the room turn ice cold. It was a small object, tightly folded, wrapped multiple times with transparent packing tape to make it waterproof. Pressed onto the outer surface of the package, just under the tape, was an object made of black, stiff, and thick hairs. As far as I could tell, it wasn't human hair. It was much harder, wiry, and thick. I carefully cut the tape on the package with the tip of the knife. As the tape opened, a thick, yellowed piece of paper emerged from inside. The stiff hairs wrapped around the paper fell off and scattered over the bed. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper. Right in the middle of the paper was a passport-sized photograph of me. It was one of the photos taken during my university years, the same one that stood framed in my mother's living room. But what truly froze my blood was not the photograph itself. On my face in the photograph, exactly where my eyes were, 2 large holes had been cut out. My eyes had been gouged out. Around the holes, the surface was scribbled over with a black ballpoint pen, filled with meaningless symbols and strange shapes. On the back of the photograph, only 3 words were written. It was my aunt's handwriting. May his eyes be satisfied with the soil. At that moment, lightning struck in my mind. I now understood what those sharp things stabbing my eyes were, those needle-like hairs, and why my face was constantly being scratched in my dreams. Those animal hairs in my gouged-out eyes were sleeping with me every night, inside the pillow where I rested my head, just a few centimeters beneath my brain. Anger overpowered fear. I got up from the bed and turned on the lights in the room. If she had hidden this inside my pillow, where else could she have placed things? I remembered that day when my mother was in the kitchen and my aunt had stayed in the bedroom for a long time. Using the excuse of changing the sheets, she had shut herself in the room. Who knows what else she had touched? I took the other pillow from the bed. I removed its case and cut it open as well. There was nothing inside. I lifted the blanket on the bed and looked inside the storage base. I opened the doors of my wardrobe and checked the pockets of my clothes and the backs of the shelves. On the top shelf of the wardrobe, hidden behind sweaters, I found a pile of dried, blackish soil. It was as if a handful of mud had been deliberately smeared there and left to dry. Mixed into the soil were a few strands of those same black, stiff animal hairs. My stomach turned. I didn't want to touch the soil, but with the help of a tissue, I scraped that filth off and placed it next to the other package on the bed. My breathing had quickened. As I paced around the room, I decided to search the rest of the house. I went into the living room. I checked under the carpets and between the sofa cushions. Then the front door came to mind. I had heard that old people often hid such things in door thresholds or frames. I took a chair from beside the coat rack in the hallway and placed it in front of the door. I climbed onto the chair and ran my fingers along the upper part of the wooden frame. Before long, my fingertips struck something cold and hard. It was a small, triangular object, tightly wrapped in black tape. It was heavy. Most likely, it contained poured lead or some heavy metal. I took it and placed it on the coffee table in the living room. I lined up everything I had found side by side. The torn pillowcase, my photograph wrapped in animal hair with its eyes gouged out, the dried soil, and that triangular heavy object. As I sat there on the couch, staring at this scene on the table, everything I had experienced over the past 6 months flashed before my eyes like a film strip. Alice leaving me, my senseless outbursts of anger at work, those suffocating nights when I came to the brink of losing my mind. None of it was a coincidence. Someone I thought was my own blood had plunged into unimaginable evil just because this house was left to my mother and me. She had blamed me for my cousin Tyler's failures and by turning to dark paths had aimed to drive me insane inside this house. It was 4 a.m. I wanted to call my mother and tell her everything, but when I picked up the phone, I hesitated. Could she handle such news at this hour? She had heart problems. If she learned of this betrayal from my aunt, she might have a crisis. I had to wait for the morning. Leaning back on the large couch in the living room, I began to wait, my eyes fixed on those objects on the table, enchanted with spells and charms. But it didn't take long for me to realize that the atmosphere in the house had changed. From the moment I took those objects out of where they were hidden and left them exposed, the air inside the house had grown heavier. It was as if that poison, which had been secretly at work until that day, had become more aggressive now that it was revealed. The temperature in the living room dropped noticeably. Despite the heating, I felt my arms covered in goosebumps, and I could see a faint vapor coming out of my mouth when I exhaled. Inside the house, especially in the corridor stretching from the entrance to the living room, a dense shadow was gathering. When I glanced in that direction, I could see the darkness rippling like a liquid. There was no sound. The house was completely silent, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was a heavy silence that strained my eardrums. That familiar pressure on my chest began to come over me while I was awake this time. I was struggling to breathe where I sat. I could feel in every cell of my body that the animal hairs on the table were slightly trembling, and that an indescribable hatred was spreading into the room from the face of my photograph with its gouged-out eyes facing toward me. I averted my gaze from the photograph. I wanted to stand up, go to the kitchen and get a glass of water, but my legs wouldn't hold me. They didn't feel like they belonged to me. Just like during those sleep paralysis episodes, my muscles were locked. The darkness in the corridor thickened and began to slide toward the entrance of the living room. When that suffocating energy wrapped around my throat like an invisible hand, I couldn't swallow. My eyes were wide open as if they were about to pop out, and I began struggling while staring at the chandelier in the living room. This time I was not dreaming. I was fully awake, and that weight was on me with all its reality. My fingertips were going numb, and my mind was slowly sinking into darkness. In my own house, in my own living room, I was about to die because of my aunt's greed. The invisible hand around my throat tightened more and more. My eyes were locked on the chandelier, and my attempt to breathe had turned into a rasping struggle. My mind was gradually fatting, and my consciousness was about to shut down completely. At that very moment, a sound drifting in through the open living room window shattered the deep and heavy silence outside. The first long and echoing toll of the morning bells rising from a cathedral in the lower streets of Brooklyn filled the room. The sound waves vibrated the air, almost splitting the dense, dark energy inside the house in two. As the echoes rang out, that vice around my throat suddenly loosened. I threw myself forward and collapsed onto the carpet. As I drew in air as if my lungs were tearing apart, I was seized by violent coughing fits one after another. I was on my hands and knees, staring at the sweat dripping onto the parquet floor. I could breathe. That weight had lifted from my chest, but I knew the danger had not completely passed yet. That sick, demonic presence in the house had only stepped back under the powerful atmosphere of the bells. I stood up. My knees were trembling, but my mind was clearer than ever. I could not keep those filthy things on the table in this house for even one more second. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a thick trash bag. I had absolutely no intention of touching those objects with my bare hands again. I took a metal tong from the drawer and returned to the living room. One by one, I carefully picked up the torn pillowcase, the stiff animal hairs inside it, my gouged out and scribbled photograph, the dried soil wrapped in the tissue, and that heavy, triangular enchanted object from the door frame, and placed them into the bag. While doing all this, I could feel my back freezing cold, and I felt as if something was watching me from the corners of the room, but I didn't turn around even for a second. I couldn't let fear take over me. I had to stay composed. I tied the bag tightly. That wasn't enough. I took another trash bag and wrapped it over the first one. I threw on just a jacket and put my car keys in my pocket. As I locked the door behind me, the cold air of the apartment hallway hit my face. I rushed down the stairs two at a time and stepped out onto the street. It was not yet daylight. The hazy twilight of a winter morning had settled over the street. I immediately got into the car and tossed the bag onto the passenger seat. I started the engine. My destination was the waterfront. I had always heard from older people. The only solution for such dark matters, such malicious spells, was flowing water. The deep, dark, salty water of the river was the only force that could drown and destroy this filth within itself. I began driving down the narrow slopes of Brooklyn Heights toward the coastal road. The inside of the car was freezing. Even though I turned the heater to the highest setting, I couldn't shake off the cold penetrating my bones. I knew there was physically no one in the back seat, but that intense feeling of being watched was right at the back of my neck. I didn't turn on the radio. I couldn't tolerate any sound. Only the hum of the engine and my rapid breathing could be heard. The joints of my hands gripping the steering wheel had turned white. When I stopped at red lights, I felt as if I could hear a faint rustling sound coming from the black bag beside me, like fabric brushing against itself. I didn't look. I fixed my eyes on the road and pressed the gas. I reached the banks of the Hudson River. Far from the Statue of Liberty, I pulled over at a point where the water pushed deepest toward the sea. Aside from a few people exercising in the morning, there was no one around. I got out of the car and took the bag from the passenger seat. The waves of the river were crashing harshly against the shore, and a strong smell of seaweed filled the air. I walked all the way to the edge of the water. I held the black bag tightly in my right hand. I looked down at the dark, churning water below. The current of the Hudson was quite strong here. Reciting the prayers I knew in my heart, wishing for all this evil to leave my life, I hurled the bag toward the river with all my strength. The bag arced through the air and fell into the water. Under the weight of that heavy triangular object inside, it sank within seconds into the dark waters and disappeared. At the very moment the bag submerged, something physical happened. I felt a weight of tons sliding off my shoulders and flowing into the water. That invisible vice that had been crushing my chest and making it hard to breathe for months vanished completely. I took a very deep breath. The salty morning air filling my lungs felt like the cleanest, freshest thing in the world. For the first time in 6 months, I was truly breathing. I sat by the shore, covered my face with my hands, and for a while simply enjoyed that relief. As the sun slowly began to rise behind the skyscrapers, the fact that the dark fear inside me had also sunk to the bottom of the water gave me a great sense of ease. The river had taken everything away. I bought coffee and a bagel from a kiosk by the shore. As I ate my breakfast while watching the view, my phone rang. It was my mother calling. When I saw her name on the screen, a feeling of guilt filled me. The night before, while looking at that photograph, I had thought that because of my aunt's greed, even my mother might have been targeted. She was a naive and kind-hearted woman who trusted her own sister unconditionally. If she learned that the source of what I had been through was my Aunt Sarah, it would destroy her. I answered the phone. My mother's voice was full of concern. "Samuel, my son, I saw you in distress in my dream last night. You were out of breath, struggling. It was like you were struggling in a dark place. I didn't feel at ease at all. I've been praying for you since the early hours of the morning." "Are you okay, my son?" she asked. My throat tightened. My mother's heart had felt it. While that darkness was suffocating me, her soul had also been constricted along with mine. I couldn't tell her everything I had been through and shatter her by showing her how dark her own sister's heart was. She had heart problems and she couldn't handle such betrayal. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice as steady and calm as possible. "I've just been a bit upset at work. I've been sleepless for a few days. It's probably just the stress. There's nothing to worry about. I'm perfectly fine. In fact, believe me, I'm better than I've been in months." She questioned me a bit more. She had noticed that strange calmness in my voice, but she didn't press further. She said she would bring me some nice food over the weekend and hung up. When I put the phone back in my pocket, that relieved expression on my face turned into a cold determination. This wouldn't end here. That woman shouldn't think she would get away with this evil. I had to hold her accountable. I had to confront this dark mindset that had stolen my sleep, my sanity, my relationship with my fiancé, and nearly my life. I got into the car and headed straight to Queens, to the apartment where my Aunt Sarah lived. It was 8:30 in the morning. The streets were just beginning to come to life. I entered the street, parked the car, went into the building and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. I pressed the doorbell for a long time. I heard the sound of slippers from inside. When the door opened, my aunt was standing in front of me. She was wearing a robe, her hair disheveled. When she saw me at her door at that hour, the grogginess on her face instantly turned into surprise, then into a carefully concealed panic. "Samuel, what is it, son? What are you doing here at this hour?" "Did something happen to your mother?" she asked anxiously. I looked carefully at her face. Behind those eyes that I had believed for years looked at me with affection, I could now clearly see that sly, dark expression. Could the evil in a person's heart be etched so subtly into their features? I didn't go inside. I stood at the threshold and looked directly into her eyes. "My mother is perfectly fine," I said in an icy voice. "And I'm very well too. In fact, I'm better than I've been in months, Aunt." She immediately understood what I meant beneath my words, that dangerous calmness in my voice. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her posture straightened. That sweet aunt mask slipped off her face in an instant. "What do you mean? You show up at my door this early in the morning and speak in riddles." At that moment, my cousin Tyler appeared from the room at the end of the hallway. He was wearing sweatpants, rubbing his eyes as he came toward us. "What's going on, Mom?" "Samuel, what's up, cousin?" I looked at Tyler. I didn't know how much he was involved in this, but I was sure that my Aunt Sarah had created this hell, because she constantly compared Tyler's failed life with mine. "What's up, Tyler?" I said. "I found those special packages my aunt prepared for me. You know, the animal hairs she placed inside the stuffing, right under my head. And that graduation photo of mine. The one where she gouged out my eyes and scribbled strange symbols around it. And the one where she wrote in her own handwriting on the back, 'May his eyes be satisfied with the soil.' I found them." Tyler's face turned pale. He took a step back and looked at his mother. My aunt, on the other hand, froze in such a way that I thought she had forgotten to breathe. That fake confidence in her eyes had shattered. Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth to say something, to deny it, but the words got stuck in her throat. Because I wasn't making a guess. I had caught her clearly with her own handwriting. I don't understand what you're talking about," she said in a trembling voice. But her voice was so weak, so guilty, that the lie hung in the air. "You do understand," I said, taking a step forward. I didn't raise my voice at all. Shouting would create the chaotic environment she wanted. I was simply confronting her like an auditor presenting the irregularities he had found. "The weight you hid in the door frame. The dry grave soil you smeared inside my closet. And that filth inside my pillow, I found all of it. For months, you've been trying to drive me insane in my own house. Trying to take my mind away from me. Just because my grandfather left that house to my mother. Just because your son couldn't hold down a job. You tried to ruin my life. You're slandering me," my aunt muttered. Her eyes filled with tears, but these were not tears of regret. They were tears of anger at being caught, of her pride shattering. "I am your aunt. I never separated you from my own child." "Is that why you gouged out my eyes in that photograph?" I asked mockingly. "Listen, Aunt Sarah. I sent all that filth to the bottom of the river. I don't care if those sick, demonic things in that house now fall upon you. I didn't come here to argue or fight. I came here to give you a warning." Tyler tried to intervene. "Samuel, look, you're misunderstanding. My mom wouldn't do such things. Someone must have entered the house." I looked at him in such a way that he couldn't finish his sentence. "Only my mother and my aunt enter that house besides me, Tyler. And every time my aunt comes, she locks herself in my room to change the bed sheets. And what a coincidence that her beautiful handwriting comes out of my pillow. Don't tell me fairy tales. Both of you listen to me carefully." I took a deep breath. and said the harshest and clearest sentence I had ever spoken in my life. From today on, you do not have a nephew named Samuel, and my mother does not have a sister named Sarah. You will never step into that house again. You will not call my mother. You will not ask about her. If my mother asks why you distanced yourselves, you will tell her that a dispute over inheritance happened between us, and that I disrespected you. I will be the bad guy, I don't care. But my mother will never learn about this disgusting thing you did. That woman already has a weak heart. If you upset her, if you cause her to learn about this, or if you try to continue these dark games you played on me. I stopped. I looked straight into my aunt's eyes. If I sense the slightest problem in my life, I will gather enough evidence to prove that the writing on that photograph belongs to you. And I will go and report all of you. I will send copies of that photograph to the entire family and disgrace you. Do you understand me? My aunt swallowed. She was staring at me with that hateful expression on her face, but I could also see that she was afraid. Her greatest weakness was what people would say. The thought of all the relatives finding out that she was a witch who had tried to ruin her own nephew's life terrified her. I didn't wait for their answer. I turned my back and walked toward the elevator. As the elevator door closed, I saw my aunt's shattered, dark face one last time. Knowing that I would never see that face again gave me relief. When I returned to my home in Brooklyn Heights, it was close to noon. I decided to clean the house from top to bottom. I bought a lot of cleaning supplies from the market. I opened all the windows wide and let the clean, windy air of New York fill every room. I stuffed all the pillows, duvets, and sheets into large trash bags and threw them away. I put all the clothes in my wardrobe into the wash. With vinegar water, I personally wiped every floor, door frame, and cabinet interior. The heavy and suffocating air in the living room was replaced by the sharp but clean smell of vinegar. I called a locksmith and completely changed the lock cylinder of the front door. From now on, no one would be able to enter that house without my permission. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. My aunt and Tyler followed my warning exactly. They told my mother that they had argued with me, that I was very disrespectful, and that they no longer wanted to see me. At first, my mother was very upset about this situation. She tried hard to reconcile us, but when I firmly refused, she eventually accepted it. Her relationship with Aunt Sarah was reduced to cold messages sent only during holidays. As for my life, it began to improve miraculously. Since the day I threw that bag into the river, that demonic presence has not disturbed me even once. The sleep paralysis, the feeling of suffocation, that dark weight pressing on my chest, all of it disappeared completely. At night, when I laid my head on the clean pillows I had bought, I fell into a deep, uninterrupted sleep and woke up refreshed in the mornings. My performance at work increased rapidly. My damaged nerves recovered. My relationships with people got back on track. I even ran into Alice at a mutual friend's wedding, and I felt the cold ice between us slowly beginning to melt. We had started having coffee together again, texting each other. Everything was as it should be. My life had climbed out of that dark, bottomless pit and turned its face back toward the sun. But with such dark matters, you can never truly know whether that evil, mixed into soil and blood, has been completely erased. What happened in that house remained as a memory in the corner of my mind. My aunt's envious and hateful gaze never left my thoughts. So whatever you do, never stray from goodness and righteousness. Because whatever you do, whether it is good or evil, one day it comes back and finds you. Yes, dear friends, that was the story. I wish happy and peaceful days to everyone who listened until the end. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe. See you in the next video.